Hello and welcome back to the Geek Warning podcast. I'm Dave Vroomen and this is another bonus episode in addition to the regular weekly show. This week's episode came together after the boutique brand Open Cycles teased a long-awaited update to its Up gravel bike. For those who aren't familiar with the Open Up, it was a truly early mover in the gravel space, being one of the first production bikes to feature dual wheel size compatibility with 700C and 650B. And it achieved the clearance between the rear tyre and chainring by introducing drop chainstays to the market. It was undoubtedly a bike that helped to inspire the modern gravel bike that so many brands offer today. That innovation didn't come from nowhere either. Open was founded and continues to be run by two heavy hitters of the bike industry. There's Andy Kessler, former CEO of BMC, and then there's Gerard Vroomen, co-founder of Cervelo, and until recently also the co-owner of 3T. A brand that has pushed some boundaries in the gravel space in recent years, particularly talking aero. Back to that Open Up. It hadn't been updated for a long time. So when Open teased the new version as offering compatibility with an unreleased Shimano drivetrain and a move to 700C wheels exclusively, I was more than intrigued. In this episode, Gerard Vroomen covers the details of the new Open Up and the Upper bike range and the design decisions made. We touch on Open's move to onshoring production. I pry unsuccessfully into that teased Shimano compatibility. We chat about the move to threaded bottom brackets, what these updates mean for the rest of the Open Cycles range, and honestly, a large part of my motivation for this chat was to help prove why 700C is becoming the common wheel size in gravel. However, as you'll hear, I had to eat my own hat, as Gerard, despite designing a 700C only bike, strongly defended the smaller 650B wheel size and lamented its loss. Before we begin, our bonus episodes are made for members of Escape Collective. If you're hearing this message, then you're on the free feed of the podcast, and you will still be able to listen to approximately half of the discussion. For the full episode, and sorry, but most of the exciting stuff is toward the end, then please head to escapecollective.com/member and become a member of Escape Collective. Signing up won't just support our mission of being independent of the industry we write about, but it'll give you full access to all of our exclusive podcasts, written content, and more. As a reminder, Escape Collective is wholly funded by its members, so you won't see any advertising, sponsored content, or affiliate links in what we do. Okay, so with that, let's begin. All right, Gerard, thanks for joining the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How about you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. All right, well, thank you for joining the podcast. I mean, the reason why I wanted to get you on is Open Cycles has been publishing a few things on its blog as of late, and there was a tease of the next generation of the Up and the Upper bikes that are coming out, and I thought it's interesting because I guess for those that aren't familiar, like the Open Up was released in 2015, and it was kind of a trend-setting bike in more ways than one. But for me, it was the bike that introduced me to like the mixed wheel sizes of gravel, where you could have a bike that sort of was like a aggressive road bike, but that also fit like a smaller 650B gravel wheel, and you could have this one do-it-all, you know, a bike for riding on the road during the week and a weekender gravel bike all in one. You also introduced drop chainstays, if I'm not mistaken. I think you're the first to do that, which has very quickly became a trend. But yeah, I mean, with that, there's a new bike, or many new bikes. So, I mean, what can you tell me? It sounds like you're starting with something a bit limited edition, and then it'll eventually move to the more production version.
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe if I back up a second. So,
yeah,
when we started Open, we wanted to sort of do everything different from, what Andy and I had done before on the bigger companies like Cervelo and BMC. And so we have a very limited model range, right? We have 3 models, one road bike, and then an all-round gravel bike, let's say, and then an extreme gravel bike. And all of those 3 are very similar in philosophy. I mean, very different places where you would ride them, but they're all focused on comfort and on a good rider position and on creating the maximum ability through tires, basically. Those have, as you indicated, lasted quite long, right? The Up is coming up on 10 years, which is insane for a bike model. And of course, that was possible because it was sort of the first of its kind when it came out. So it remained fresh for a long time. And the dual wheel size was one of it. And the other thing that it really started was that sort of performance gravel angle, right? Before that, you would ride gravel on either something quite extreme or a converted mountain bike or a road bike with the biggest tires you could squeeze in. And you saw everything in gravel races except gravel bikes, basically. And the bikes that came closest were more for sort of 3 months in Mongolia than they were for what we now do Unbound or things like that. So sort of merging this capability off-road with a real road bike fast position, that was sort of what the Up unleashed. And of course, that's now become a huge trend, right? And also owing to the fact that road bikes became more gravelly with disc brakes and all these kind of things. So the whole middle section kind of blurred, and and any gravel bike is a road bike, and some road bikes are a pretty decent gravel bike as well. So now we were working on new models. I mean, we've been working on new Ups for a long time, and always we've discarded it because, I mean, for me personally, the pressure was always too high. To do something of the level of the original Up again is just, I mean, it's impossible. Like, we will never create another bike that it's just not a new bike, but it also changes where people ride and how people ride. So, and
the industry. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think I just put the bar a bit too high for myself to achieve that again, because it will never happen in my lifetime. I should just, resign to that fact. So, but at the same time, there's lots of other ideas that we had that we could implement into a bike. And so, 2 years ago, we really started seriously to go, okay, what would a new Up look like? And then with that also, what would a new Wide look like? What would which is our extreme gravel bike? What would the new Open Mind look like, which is a road bike? Because again, they will all be, this same family, but for different purposes. And so with this limited edition that we're bringing out, which is called the Upper Concept, that just shows the direction that, that this new line of bikes is going into. So it shows the new tube shapes and new detailed solutions, at least some of them. Other ones we still keep hidden until, other models. And so that's really what this bike is about, just to show the direction for, probably the next 10 years of Open.
Interesting. Okay, so what are some of those details? I mean, we'll get to the tire clearance and the commitment to a certain wheel size. I've got a number of questions about that, but can you tell me about some other details for now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have a bit of a background in aerodynamics.
Sure. Yes. Small company named Cervelo. Yep.
Yeah, small company named Cervelo. For us, the goal for Open was to be fast in the real world, which means at least to have comfort, right? And we like to ride for long times, and then saving a couple grams in aerodynamics. If your bike is so uncomfortable you can't hold your position after a couple of hours, then that's kind of pointless. So that focus has remained, but our goal was while keeping that level of comfort that we're known for, how much aerodynamics can we introduce? And so you'll see, especially at the down tube, which is now a very good airfoil shape, but still within the dimensions of the original tube. So in compliance, we have the same, in some cases, better values. And then the head tube, which of course together with the down tube are the most important parts of the frame for aerodynamics, because it's near the front. It's where the airflow is still undisturbed. And so you see a much deeper head tube with a very good airfoil shape. And so those are the areas where, it's probably most visual what, the new design direction is. And then, of course, at the same time, some things have happened in the past 10 years in the bike industry. So it's been updated with the latest standards. So it's UDH compatible. It's got a T47 bottom bracket. It's also compatible with some future drivetrain standards that are not published yet anywhere. So some people might find some strange things on the frame where they go, what's that for? And then we're not allowed to tell them what it's for. But it's for something eventually. Okay. So yeah, it's probably the first frame that's future compatible with those things that nobody can talk about, which is a little odd. But not unlike when, of course, SRAM introduced the UDH derailleur at the start, then nobody really knew what it was for either. Of course, we spend a lot more effort in the total integration on the bike. So we have a one-piece stem handlebar that's very adjustable. Mm-hmm. We have actually two forks. Eventually, we have a fast aero fork, and then we have a more adventure fork that can go with the same frame. Okay. And then this upper concept is really kind of pared down all the details. So there's a lot of things it doesn't have. There's no front derailleur hanger. There's not even the possibility of ever put one on. Most of the extra bits and bobs have been taken off just to really make it a minimalist bike, like a very pure bike. But then the later up and everything, they will get more features such as, a fully integrated fender mount, internal storage, these kind of things.
Interesting. Okay. So, yeah, I guess this upper concept, it's coming out with, if I'm not mistaken, 125 frames of each a medium and a large, but no other sizes.
Correct.
And when is that coming out?
Yeah, so we will ship those between December and March. So we make them in small batches. And yeah, it's only those two sizes, which is a shame because I ride an extra large myself. So Andy will get one, but I will not.
Okay. Left out. Okay.
He's part of the majority of, sizes we sell, and I'm in
Sure.
the small minority.
Yeah.
So it's a shame, but I mean, at those volumes, we just can't do the 5 sizes, and then the regular quote unquote models that follow after that, they will come in the 5 sizes. So the up will come in 5 sizes,
and we'll see those probably for March next year kind of timeline.
The spring, the regular up ships, and that ships in good quantities. So while we're making the limited edition upper concept, we're already producing the regular up. So when we launch that, we actually have a fairly good quantity so that people can enjoy the whole season on it next year.
Okay. All right. While I'm thinking of it, I mean, you discussed it being compatible with things that can't be spoken about, but can you tell me what that dropout is? Is it a UDH?
So yeah, the dropout just fits a UDH. It will just eventually also fit other things. But
okay.
So it's a fully UDH compatible, and so SRAM transmission, Eagle, Red, Explorer, all those things fit on it. So so it's compatibility plus. It doesn't take away anything.
Yeah,
just like the original UDH did, right? It's compatible with everything, and then it later was also compatible with something new like transmission. And so it's the same thing here. It's compatible with everything, and then it's also prepared to be compatible for something on top.
Okay. You haven't yet shared photos of what that dropout looks like. Does it look exactly like a UDH, or is it slightly different in shape?
That the change was in the dropout.
I'm just broadly assuming that it might be a different shape, but is there any difference, or does it look exactly like a UDH dropout and that the compatibility is elsewhere?
Just the UDH drop. Yeah, well, if you look at the dropout, you see a UDH dropout.
Okay, all right. So I'm off base on what the change might be then. All right, I'll without knowing that, then let's move on. So you mentioned 2 forks there. I mean, adventure.
I just don't want to go to jail, Dave. It's not like I want to be complicated.
No, I don't want you to end up in drivetrain jail either. So we can not hang around on that topic for too long. But all right, so. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 2 forks there, an adventure fork and I guess a racier, more aero fork. I mean, what's the difference? Are they changing geometry at all, or is it just purely a stance?
Yeah, the geometry is the same, almost the same, let's say.
Okay.
So, you can either have very aerodynamic blades, or you can have blades that you can attach a lot of stuff to. And then in the adventure fork blades, there's also an extra level of comfort built in.
Okay.
Which of course, if you go with the fully aero blade, then it's not quite as compliant as you could go when you don't care about that because you have big bags or whatever hanging from your fork anyways. Then no point making a blade out of it.
Are they? Is the geometry suspension corrected at all?
No, it's absolutely not suspension corrected because I think that's such a compromise in the whole geometry. So, you either, I think, need to make a frame that's always suspension or a frame that's never suspension when it comes to suspension forks anyways.
Okay.
So yeah, we didn't go the half route. I think also in general, what you're seeing now, of course, at the beginning, everything was, in the gravel mode, like everything goes, but everything is a general gravel bike. And now you just see more segmentation in that, right? You see people who are going more like all road, right? And they know they never will need 60 millimeter tires. And then you have people go like, no, I'm really going for the more extreme one. So, which is logical when a market becomes, so much bigger and matures that you get, sub-segmentation in those markets. So I think that's what you're seeing now. And sort of combining the, one frame with or without suspension. I don't think that will be necessary for very long.
Okay. I mean, the segments there, I mean, Open was one of the, not the first, but certainly one of the early movers to be part of that segmentation of gravel where you introduce the open wide and that sort of like adventure style gravel bike with massive tire clearance. Where do you see the new Open Up sitting in terms of the gravel world?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is, I mean, there are lots of little segments, right? But
Sure.
if you see the two big trends, then you see what we call gravel fast. So, and what people use these bikes for is anything from, at the difficult end, pretty serious gravel, right? You can fit 44, 46 millimeter tires, whatever it is. But on the other end, it's really sort of takes over the endurance road bike kind of realm now, especially now that there are much better, bigger road tires.
Mm-hmm.
You have 32, 35 millimeter road tires, which of course would be unheard of even 5 years ago. And so with those tires, you're very fast on the road, but you have enough volume in your tire that also for the easy gravel, you can do that. So depending, of course, on where you live, but that's a setup that makes sense for a lot of people, right? I mean, a lot of people don't live in Emporia, Kansas, but they live maybe in a big city. And so the reality is there's a lot of asphalt before you get to the fun stuff. And so an important factor for those bikes is that they're fast and fun on the asphalt, even though you buy them for the gravel. If the gravel is too far away and the road there is no fun because, which of course was the traditional drawback with, say, a mountain bike, right? Like, there's fun stuff to do with a mountain bike, but those first 10 miles are just, mind-numbingly boring. And so you never get there, or you have to drive there. And so that's one of the, that fast gravel goes all the way from endurance, easy gravel to, pretty serious gravel. The second segment is the one above that, right? Which goes from serious gravel to absolutely crazy gravel, single track, bike packing, all these things.
And that's where the wide, I guess, remains for open cycles.
Correct. And just the difference between the up and the wide becomes a bit bigger. Like there was a lot of overlap before, and now they move a little bit further in their respective segments, I guess.
Interesting. Okay. Talking of geometry, were there any big changes done to the upper and up geometry, or will there be?
It changes because there again, of course, there are a lot of trends in geometry right now, but it all depends on what you're optimizing for. And so for us, it's always been this feeling that, yes, I'm riding a gravel bike, but the handling still reminds me of my road bike. We're not really building a faster mountain bike. We're building, a fast road bike that can handle the troubles that you come across when you're riding gravel. And so, of course, both of those trends exist, and both of those trends probably have a place. But it comes back to what I said earlier, that, what people really underestimate in designing a gravel bike is how it rides when you're not on gravel. Everything is fun anyways.
Sure.
Right. It's the time you're not on gravel, which is a reality for most buyers of these bikes, that really matters as well. And so I think on the gravel, we found that you can have a slow handling bike, you can have a very agile bike, and both really ride really well. They ride differently, but they ride very well. We never find with customers that they say, oh, this one is much better than the other. Like both of them, are just fun to ride. But on the easier, faster roads, there's a clear preference of people for the agile geometries. So so we're keeping that. We're keeping as close as we can to that agile geometry. And then, but there's some tweaks from an analysis of how people ride, the up and the wide and how many spacers they use, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha.
So we can make some adjustments.
Okay.
And we also adjust for the fact that, we now have this specific stem bar combination and what the geometry of the stem and the bar is to get people in the right position.
Okay. So you've gone perhaps a touch more stack on the front end and...
Yeah. So it's a touch more stack, and then the reach is adjusted because of course stack and reach are a little bit interrelated. And so, but in a way that, if you currently ride an up in medium with a 100 millimeter stem, then you're going to ride the new up in medium with a 100 millimeter stem.
Okay.
Just maybe with the spacer less, but the overlap in that sense on the fitting side of the geometry, not the steering side, but the fitting side of the geometry, the overlap is 100%.
Cool. Okay. All right. We'll leave that for when you publish a geometry chart then. Another interesting thing, I mean, you've Open Cycles, and before that, when you're with Cervelo, I mean, you're pretty big proponents of press fit, and you've created a lot of bikes of press fit, but this one has gone to a T40 threaded T47 threaded bottom bracket. Is that your first bike with a threaded bottom bracket in a long time?
No, it's not. I'm so old. I've done a lot of threaded bottom brackets.
I remember your original soloist in aluminium suddenly was threaded, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah, and even the first carbon ones were threaded.
Okay, all right, yep.
So I mean, just 68 millimeter, like old style,
sure.
BSA thread. But no, there's a lot of threaded bottom brackets in my past as well. And I don't necessarily like threaded bottom brackets, to be honest. You can make good bottom brackets with threads or with press fit, and you can make bad ones with both. And so I think the early, which is not unusual, when you go to a new system or a new technology, the early adopts that are not necessarily, executing it flawlessly, right? So the first press fit bikes were bad.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's gotten a reputation because of that has endured. And at the same time, everybody seems to have forgotten about all the problems with threaded bottom brackets. I was very sad to read a review, for example, of the new Cervelo Soloist, which Cervelo went to T47, and then the review was like, it was a great bike, too bad the bottom bracket creaked. And, you would think, how's that possible? T47 doesn't creak, right? But, if you're unlucky that it does, or a wrong combination of parts, it can't, right? The number of problems we've had with press fit in the last 5 years is minuscule. Yeah, absolutely minuscule. And you're not going to get fewer problems with T47. Right? There's just, you're adding complication, right? You're adding, you're gluing in parts that you're then threading things to, all that kind of stuff. And even if you are like a threaded connection also has its issues. That's just how it is. It's not hugely important to me. Like, you're not going to get, many more problems with T47. It's just going to be the same, if you do it properly, the same very low level. And so that's what the market wants. I don't particularly care either way.
Okay. All right.
So I'd rather focus my energy on other things, because it's also, it's almost politics. Like, nobody's really listening to the arguments anyway. So, you're people who are just, they're a T47 state, or they're in a press fit state, and it's just that's just how it is, right? So it's not really worth the debate anymore, because nobody's listening to each other. It's not that important, because both can be made pretty well, and off you go.
Or pretty badly.
Considering making a special press fit version for the aficionados, but we'll see how that goes. For now, It's T47.
All right, so it sounds like it's fully consumer-led, and would you agree in me saying that it felt for you like a threaded bottom bracket was just less consumer friction to purchase than a press fit?
Well, there's certainly less hatred for T47, probably because it's newer. Eventually.
Yeah.
But now it's still, T47 is the cute baby that everybody thinks,
the broader industries tried their best to screw T47 up in the short period of time by doing 6 different tool fitments of one design, but it's
because that's one of the issues, of course, with T47, and when everything is so big, there's really not enough space anymore to have proper indentation and proper way to fit a tool, right? So that's one of the drawbacks of T47. No, well, depending on if it's internal, external, and maybe we won't go into that, because then we'll have a couple hours. But for sure,
I have an article on that one if anyone's interested. But I
learned a long time ago there should be no plural version of the word standard.
Yes,
but clearly in the bike industry, we haven't really gotten that memo.
No,
although in other areas, right, people say, it's crazy, but on other areas, the bike industry, has done a slightly better job. And has at least, weeded out other standards a bit quicker. Like, if you look at road disc, I think it's quite remarkable that we have, one caliper standard and, only a few disc sizes. So it's not always bad, but certainly other areas like bottom brackets and headsets, it takes effort to screw it up that badly. That's for sure. But the whole industry is united in making it screwed up. So.
Fair enough. All right. So new frames threads, and it's perhaps a feature we might see for other open cycles.
We'll do T47 everything, also just for compatibility and
sure.
And of course there are now, which was not the case 5 years ago, but now there are a lot of T47 bottom brackets out there. So everybody's got their choice.
Plenty of options.
whatever bearings she wants. And
Is it asymmetric in any regard, or is it just as standard as it comes?
Oh, that would have been fun. Another asymmetric standard. No, it's symmetrical.
Okay, all right. So you haven't joined Cervelo and Factor on that one then. So, all right, let's change pace a little bit. We'll get to tires in a second, but I guess one other feature of this bike is that it's no longer made in Asia. You've moved manufacturing to Portugal. You were probably pretty instrumental in getting 3T to start with some Italian-based manufacturing and that sort of onshoring. Yeah, I mean, what can you tell me about this move?
Really, already from the day we started Cervelo, we wanted to, we were interested in onshoring production. At that point, production had already moved to Asia, like just even when we started Cervelo. But we were always interested in trying to produce locally, and usually, of course, the costs are prohibitive. But we've made lots of attempts, right? So at Cervelo, we had Project California, where we were producing in California, which was insanely expensive, and we weren't really able to drive the cost out. And then, we've had some other attempts. And then at 3T, we really decided to start from scratch. Say, okay, if you want to produce in Europe, how are what production technologies are you going to use to make that happen, and to make sure that it's all about labor costs, right? So if you get the hours of labor down, then it doesn't really matter that much how much you pay for an hour. So with all these technologies like winding and injection molding and or resin transfer molding to drive the number of labor hours out and get the costs under control. And so we built a factory in Italy around that. We also bought some other companies to acquire technology, and so that was a long project, but ended up really well. And I think for those full aero shapes, it's really panned out well. Can't say anything else. With Open, we're it's a little different, right? We have a different angle. So as mentioned before, we have the comfort, we have the lightweight with aero aspects. And I think there, different production technologies are required again to do that to the highest level. So we were looking at ways to produce locally. So and also there were some other reasons, but let's finish this one first.
Okay.
And so in Portugal, there's a factory called Carbon Team, and that's a collaboration between a couple of parties. One of which is the German company Bike Ahead.
Yeah, they make the one-piece wheels. Yeah,
and so they really know their stuff. And so for frames and for other things, they thought, hey, let's work together with some people in Portugal, because of course, I mean, labor is less expensive in Portugal than it is in Germany, but it's still close enough that you can have good control of the factory, visit it regularly, and develop things. I mean, we've known the Bike Ahead guys for a long time, so we ended up in the Carbon Team factory, and that's been pretty good. I mean, of course, the costs are not what they are in Asia. The frame is about double what it costs in Asia, and then the painting, Europe is even worse because, well, painting is just a very labor-intensive part of the process. Obviously, that's just 100% somebody holding a paint gun. The painting we did in Asia was relatively expensive as well because we had pretty stringent environmental rules. But there's also areas where the painting is cheap because just everything goes into the sewer or river.
Yeah.
And of course, that's also much more regulated in Europe. We decided that we wanted to do that for several reasons. First, because of the what we wanted to achieve technically with the frames, and probably most importantly for Andy and myself, just as a personal decision. And that's I don't know. I guess one way we have to explain, and the other side I don't really want to talk about it, but. A couple of years ago, we just decided, hey, the way the world is going, we can't really have much influence on that. But we, as tiny as we are as people, and even as the company Open, if we can have a tiny influence, then we want it to be for the better and not for the worse. So we decided, hey, we only want to produce in countries and in places where we feel happy about, let's say, the general situation of that country. And so we started sort of this project internally called Made in Freedom. Because also, I mean, gravel riding, all these things, cycling in general, it's all about freedom, right? So it doesn't make sense to have your products produced in unfreedom. Maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, people thought, economic development, it can bring democracy, all these kind of things. Could have happened. Didn't happen. Sure. So at some point, you got to try something else. And so we just did it for ourselves, right? I mean, what do we feel comfortable with? What can we do? So, and that's the decision we made. Like, we just don't want to be part of that system anymore. And so we decided, Portugal is a good country for that. We still have some parts made in Taiwan, for example, some parts made in Italy. So yeah, for us, it was probably the main reason to really push through on this despite the costs. And, but at the same time, it's not some sort of, competition in ethics or anything like that. Like, any person and any company should do if our customers like this move, then great. But in effect, we're not doing it for our customers. We're just doing it for ourselves.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
When we wake up in the morning and look at the mirror. So,
okay.
And, but it's also been interesting, to get this project going, and not just on the frame, but on everything, and quite challenging in some ways, because of course there is quite the infrastructure in the bike industry in certain areas of the world. But we're really happy with it.
So it sounds like you'll eventually, as the new models for Open come out, as you update the entire range, it sounds like you'll eventually end up being entirely European manufactured as a company. Am I reading between the lines?
Countries outside Europe, right?
Okay.
Taiwan mentioned, Japan, they make some bike parts that are quite nice. So it's not all European based, but certainly the frame has its focus on Europe. Some other parts, we make some working on some parts with Wolf's Tooth in the US.
Oh, cool. Yep.
So it's still fairly global, but certainly, big chunks like the frame, by doing that in Europe, which of course is one of our two big markets, it helps in many other ways as well, right? So it's be a lot easier in shipping. We're close to our custom painters, where we're doing more and more projects.
Yep.
It helps in many ways, and it's close to us. So, for development, it also is a lot easier when you can just go visit quickly and
quickly prototype. I don't want to stick on this for too long, because we do have a big topic to get to, but are there cost savings in that? I mean, you mentioned like labor's like approximately twice as much, and I'd imagine raw materials are higher.
Like a raw frame cost is about twice as much. I know labor is a lot more than twice as much in Portugal than it is in some Asian countries, but the overall cost in the end, the carbon cost is about the same. So if you do everything together, then your raw frame ends up being about twice as much. So the cost savings, that's sort of after the cost savings of, reduced shipping costs and import duties and things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So then the net for the frame is about double.
Okay. All right. So still a big difference. Yeah.
It's the nice thing about, what we are is open. We can do whatever we want, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then, we'll see how it goes. So we have tried to absorb those costs as much as possible. So, when we look at the new prices, they're barely adjusted for inflation. So it's not like we've really spiked the prices because of that.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, now the difference is a bit bigger again, because the current models we've reduced in price a bit. But if you look at the original prices of the up and the upper, then there's barely a difference.
Okay. All right. I guess that's one to watch, but I'm just looking at the clock, and I think we should chat about tires, because it stood out to me as again, the original Open Up, you were the first to introduce like the dual wheel size idea, 650B for gravel, 700C for road, but the new Open Up is made the stance that it's now 700C only. So I'm curious about that. Can you tell me why that decision came about? Hey, Dave here. I did warn you at the start of this episode, and unfortunately this is where we have to hit pause in the conversation with Gerard. There was plenty more covered, and so if you'd like to continue listening, please head to escapecollective.com/member and sign up. A membership gains you access to our full catalogue of member-exclusive podcasts, articles, and more. As a reminder, Escape Collective is wholly and solely funded by its members. There's no advertising, affiliate links, or sponsored content. I hope you come back to listen to the rest. Cheers.